Welcome to Donzi Tech. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about how you can build backends for your website using Django. So to get started, we are going to create a folder on our desktop, and let's name it my first project. After, you can open your project with your command line. Now the first thing to do is to make sure that you have Python installed on your local computer before you proceed with this tutorial. You have to make sure you have a basic understanding of the basics of Python before you can proceed with Django. So we first start by creating a virtual environment. So you can pip install virtual env. So as you can see, it says requirement already satisfied because I have virtual env already installed on my machine. So you can just create our environment by saying virtual env, and then we give the name of our virtual environment. I'm going to call my env, then hit on enter. It will automatically create the virtual environment for you. Now the virtual environment is like another space on your computer where Django gets to find the libraries needed to run the Django project. So whatever libraries you install in your virtual environment, it's not going to be installed on your local machine. It's going to be only unique to that particular environment you created. Okay, so now we have our environment created. So you can go back to your folder and you can see we have here the environment name here, env. So you can just copy the part of this file and then we paste it here to activate our virtual environment. And also if you want to deactivate it, we just type in deactivate. It will just deactivate the environment. Okay, let me clear the screen. Now the next thing is for us to install Django. So to do that, I'm just going to type in this simple command, pip install Django, then hit enter on your keyboard. You're going to install Django in the virtual environment we created here. So this is going to take a while to download the Django and the supported libraries you will be using for the projects here. Okay, so it's done. Let me clear the screen. Now the next thing is for us to create our project. So to create a project in Django, we just say Django -admin start project. Then you type in the name of your project. Let's call this a blog. Then hit enter. Okay, now you can check in your directory. You can see we have our new project folder here, blog. Now the next thing is for us to create our app. First, let me take you through the files here. We have it. So you can see in this blog folder, I have another folder called blog. Now this is your project. This is where you do the main configurations for your application. Later I'm going to talk about this settings.py when it starts with the Visual Studio Code. But this manage.py is the file you'll be using to create our app and also making more changes or adding commands to our project. So to make any migrations, to add any table, to run the server, to create a super user, we use this manage.py file to perform all those actions. So now let's create our app. So you just say Python manage.py. That's the file I just showed you. Manage.py start app, and then you write the name of the app you want to create. So let me call this call. Let me say call. Hit. Okay, so it's saying we are not in that directory, so we have to go into our project folder. First, let me look at the folders we have here. Okay, blog, so you can see cd and blog, and let's check. So you can see you have the manage.py file here, so you can just rerun the previous command, python manage.py start app call. Okay, so now we have created our application. So you have the app here called. So you can open this with your VS Code or any other text editor you are working with. So I'll just hit on enter. But first you can run the server to see if your application, so python manage.py run server. Okay, so you can see our local server started at this port 8 and 8000. So you can just open any browser you have and then just paste in this address. Okay. So you can see here our project was successfully installed. So now we can proceed to the Visual Studio Code. So now the first thing is to go to our settings.py file. So this we have our installed apps. So with the installed apps, it's like any app you create, you have to install it on your settings.py file so that it will be recognized by Django. Other than that, it won't work. So we created an app called core. So you just type in core here. So you can choose to bring a comma here or you can ignore it. It will still work. Okay, now you're not going to work with any static files, so you can leave them as they are now. Okay, now you're going to work with a template file. So you can change the part of your template file here. So you can just say base the hyphen. So the base there simply means that the base directory, this directory, you should look for a folder called templates. The template is just your HTML file. So you're just asking Django that, oh, go to your base directory and then search for this template folder. So template, let's create this template folder before you get any errors. Okay, so now the next thing is to set up our URLs. But before that, you have to create a URL file inside our application. We created an app called core. So let's add a new file, urls.py, and hit enter on your keyboard. And since it's an a URL file, you need to specify the path and then the URL patterns you'll be needing for it. So you can simply do that by going to our blog, that's our project folder, and then go to the urls.py and let's import include. And let's add a new path here. So just say path, and you're going to leave the first one as empty, and you're going to include core.urls. This simply means that you are going to include all the URLs inside this core application. So for instance, whatever name you use for your application here should be the same name you use here, other than that it won't work. Let me just copy these things. Then let's paste it in our urls.py file. We don't need the include here. All we need is the part here. So part, since the first part will be our home page, you can leave it blank. Let me import the views first from dot import going to create this function later inside our views file, and let's set a name. Let's call it index. That's the name of our URL. So with setting up your URLs, we have how do you call it, the class-based views, and then we have the function-based views. But I'm going to work with the function-based views. It's more popular now. Now you're going to return. Let's first return an HTTP response to see whether our project is working. So return HTTP response. So between this HTTP response tag, you can pass in an any valid HTML element, and it's going to work perfectly. Type here, working. Okay. So now let me. Okay, you can see the server automatically restarted. So I can just go back to my browser and then refresh, and you can see everything is working perfectly now. So you can now create our HTML file and then render that instead of rendering an HTML response. Sorry, an HTTP response. So let me get rid of this. Before that, let me create an HTML file inside the template folder. I'm going to name the file index.html. So HTML. Heading here. It is an H1. H1 here. So heading. You can use the style tag here. I don't want us to work with, how do you call it, setting up the static files now. The static files now, you can just proceed with this, the style attribute inside there, or the style tag inside the header tag. So H1 and take to the center. Let me create a global class here. So I'll take it will take all the text to the center, text align center. Okay. Let me change the font family for all the elements I'm going to work with. So font family should be sans serif. Okay, heading. And this pass in the class here. Center. So now let's render this HTML files to see if it's working. So return, I'm going to render. I'm first going to render the request and then the HTML file. Sorry. Render. And then the HTML file you created. .html. So you can see it's loaded the HTML file we added. So you have here heading. You can add any valid HTML element. It's just like working with your normal HTML CSS file, but with this it's just like Django is going to take your files and then reroute everything and render it to you. Now the next thing is to talk about is the admin panel. How you can add data to or create your database in Django. Let's first create a super user so that you can access the admin panel. So to do that, you just say python manage.py create super user. Hit on enter. It will prompt you to enter your username. Sorry, it will. Okay, so you can see here no search table or user. It's because we haven't run any migrations here, so there's no table created in our database. So you can see Python manager.py make migrations. So before you create any super user with your Django project, you have to first make migrations and then you migrate, so that it will create those tables for you to access the user model. Okay, we can now create our super user. So let me name this admin. Yes. Okay, now let's run the server. So refresh. Let me duplicate this. So let me go to the admin panel. So admin and then the password 123456. Click on login. And to take you straight to your admin page. This way you can manage registered users, you can change their password, you can also add a different user if you want. So now I have to create a table in our Django project, and then that table will reflect here automatically. So to create that, let's go back to our app, and then inside the models, this way we create our database. So to create a database in Django, we just use the class, just like a normal class we have in Python. So class, you can call this blog post, simply date post, and then models dot model. It will inherit from this, the models. So now I can set the attributes for our class. We have a blog should have a title. So models dot character field. You can set the max length. So let's say 255 if you want. You can change. Yes, a blog should also have a date. Should have a description. So you can say DS is simply for description. Models dot text field. Let's give it 600. And then lastly, you can add a date. You can add different attributes if you want. This just to show you how you can add models or create a table in Django. So you can say date field. Yeah. So after creating your model, you have to register that inside your admin.py file. But first, let's import our models to admin page. So from .models import, you can say import, or this will import all the models you have inside your models.py file, or you can simply import just a single class from your models.py file. So to register, you just say admin.site.register and then the name of a class. And then after, you have to make migrations so that it will create those tables for you. To make migrations, so you can see created a new model called post. Now let's run server and go back to admin panel to see the changes. So now let me refresh. If I refresh, you can see we have our table here now called post. Table here inside our database. So you can now add a post to our project. So you can give the post that maybe mining, and you can give any description to the post. Okay. So mining is very bad, something simple. you can see that we have here our post, but we can make this look a bit nicer. So you can go back to our models. You can create a simple string function to rather show the title rather than giving us post object one something. So you can see you can create a string function here, then you pass in self. So I'm just going to return self dot the title of the post. Now refresh. So you can see we now have the title of the post rather than returning the objects. Let me add another one. So schooling. Schooling is create. Then you save. Then add one more. Farming. Let's say farming helps the environment. Okay. So then the last thing to show you is to collect the data from the database and then render this to our front end. That's our index.html file. So to do that, we just go back to our views, and then inside the index, you can just collect all the data here and then render it to the HTML file. But first, let me import our models, just like we did for the admin.py. So from .models, import post. So I'm going to say post is equal to the post.objects.all. This means all the objects you have inside the post table. So now I can just pass this to the front end here. Or you can make your code look a bit nicer. You can just create a context variable here. So you just say context. So it is, let's say if you have multiple tables, you can just import them and then you add them here by separating them with a comma. The only thing is to just pass in the context variable here, and everything works the same. So now since you have rendered this to our HTML document, we can actually get them here. So to look through that, we can use the for loop here. So you can say for post in post. So remember, we used for the variable inside our view here, we use post, so you're supposed to use the same name. Now let's end the for. Let's say end for. Okay. So for our blog, we have a heading, so let's use an h4 for the heading. So you just say post dot title. Now you can see title. Your title is not from anywhere. You have title inside here. Now the next thing is the description. The description will actually be a p tag. So I just say post dot description. The last one is the date. Actually, can use an h4 to also show that. So just say post dot date. So now I can refresh. You can see the server automatically restart. If it doesn't, you can just use Ctrl+C to break it, and then you rerun it. Now let me refresh. So you can see you get all the data from the database. Let me add an HR so that it's separate. So you have the first post here, second, and then the date. So you can actually add a different post and it will just reflect at the front end. Use the Django project. You can use Django. Very good. you can see we have the Django project also added here. So there's something cool you can do when you are working with a blog. You can see anytime you add a new blog post, the latest one comes on top. So you can simply change that here by adding reversed. So the last post, so the first post rather show. And let's refresh. So you can see the latest post always comes on top. Okay, so guys, that'll be all for today's session.